Justin Pines, welcome to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Ming, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So we're so happy to have you. I understand that you had your injury not too long ago on April 9th of 2016, and you had a ski accident. That was not very long ago, but in terms of despite that, I hear that as you shared with me a couple days ago that you went on your first solo trip to Europe, to France specifically. So how was that?
Yeah, that's right. Sort of last fall, October through November, I spent 6 weeks out in France. The vast majority of that was in Paris. I've always wanted to spend a sort of concentrated amount of time there. I've had short visits over the years for work and for pleasure, but yeah, 6 weeks solo in Paris. I did a couple trips up to London and a week down in southern France in a few towns visiting family, friends, and it was a trip of a lifetime. It was a really special time.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of travel, I know that, it's a recent injury, but having traveled with friends and now solo on your own, what are some challenges that you've encountered specifically in regards to, traveling in a wheelchair?
Yeah. So I'll speak a little specifically to the solo trip to Paris and to France. I would say, and big picture here, I think most of the challenges are very overcomable. It's usually some combination of, asking for help in certain situations or being willing to kind of lower the shoulder and cope with a little bit of uncomfortableness at times. But for the most part, I was very surprised after 6 weeks traveling around at how addressable it really was. But yeah, I think one big one is just, being in a wheelchair, needing to find bathrooms that can accommodate a wheelchair, especially in Paris. A lot of times it's downstairs in a restaurant or bar or something like that. And so it just took a little bit of planning ahead. I actually use Google Maps a ton, which has a bit of a nested feature, but on any given listing, you can drill down and see accessibility of the entrance and bathroom for most establishments, which I found pretty reliable. And if a place that I was planning on meeting friends at or visiting alone didn't have a bathroom I could use, I would just either get there ahead of time to scope out a nearby restaurant or hotel or something that I could use. If it wasn't going to be a super long time at that place, I'd just use the restroom in advance, that kind of stuff. Similar for trains and transportation, just and museums, like scoping out ahead of time, and just a little bit of forethought and planning, and it was all pretty doable.
Yeah, no, I could definitely relate to the wheelchair. I was just thinking how I bet there's a chronic dehydration problem because of that issue, actually. But like you said, if we are able to plan ahead of time, there is a solution to it. But at the same time, I think a lot of us wheelchair users especially can relate that that's an issue that can be improved as well. So moving on to identity, how has, the core of your identity changed from pre-injury to post-injury? What's been different at the fundamental level?
So at the fundamental level of who I am and what I'm about in the world, I don't feel like I've changed. It is a lot of the things that have come up through this new paradigm and this new way of life, I think have sort of affirmed in terms of like core value set, what I believe about myself and what I want to be about in the world. I do think though that it's unlocked a whole new sort of scope of mission in my life and just a whole new set of things that I care about, and a huge, in one sense huge, in another sense small and very interconnected, but community that I care deeply about. So advocacy in the disabled community, I do a lot of mentoring at Craig Hospital here in South Denver, very active in sort of adaptive athletics and some of the different foundations that help to promote active lifestyle for those that have gotten injured.
Mm-hmm.
So it has provided a new sort of flavor and yeah, kind of unleashed this new trajectory of sorts in my life. But yeah, I don't know if that's a rambling answer or not, but that's
No,
how I'd get at it.
no, that's right. I think you touched on a theme that a lot of us can relate on. That even though the as we were talking on the phone about a couple of days ago, even though our challenges are on the outside that people can see it, that doesn't mean it is greater than what someone else is facing that you cannot see, that's invisible. So to hear you say that at the fundamental level you really think you haven't changed, there's no wrong answer, but I think that sounds about right. Of course there you need some time to get adjusted to this new perspective and this new way of living. Um, and
adjustment is not like a one-time hit, like, oh, I adjusted in my first 2 months and I'm good now. It's like we're always learning to adapt, and sort of it's a ongoing process, I think, this idea of sort of adjusting and yeah, reconciling. It's not a one point in time, I think.
It's a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. What has been as I shared with you a couple of days ago, you have the benefit of having lived a very long and rich life as an able-bodied person, and now you live with the perspective, from the perspective of sitting in a wheelchair. What is the biggest difference between living as an able-bodied person and then as an individual with a disability?
It's a big question. I don't think I can isolate it down to like any one singular above the rest distinction, able-bodied versus in a chair. But I do think that one thing to pick one, a striking thing that I've noticed in my own experience, kind of coming out of the hospital days and trying to reclaim a big fullness of life, and I've observed this in all the sort of immersion I've had in the community and talking with others, is that the world is de facto kind of designed for able-bodied use, and we've gotten better, but there's a lot of unknown, especially like in my case, earlier days in the injury. It was like, I have no idea what it's going to be like coming out of the hospital, just going to the movie theater, going to try and get on a train. Like, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And I think that is a common theme, is something that I care a lot about solving for. Like, provided we live in this incredibly interconnected, internet's democratized information, like we should be able to surface increasingly more and more information to sort of demystify the world for those that are approaching it from a different vantage point, for example, being in a chair. That's one prong of, I think, a multi-pronged approach that we need to take. Obviously, there's been huge strides in the last number of decades since the ADA Act, legislation in the States, where like we're actually changing the physical layout of the world to make it more accessible, which is phenomenal, and that needs a ton of work still. But I do think that in addition to that, like surfacing information to, hey, I want to go to Paris and travel for a number of weeks, like there's so much that we can provide individuals so that it's not quite as scary, basically.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, which surprises me, I applaud you for it, is that your injury was recently, and yet you've done so many things. I can't even count how many sports activities. As I was reading the different articles, I was like, wow, when did he have time to even digest and reflect on what just happened? And you've done so many things, and now you're traveling solo. And where I'm going with that point is, I think what makes it easier to not have it be this scary thing, traveling, with a disability, is for you and I to travel and then document. I saw that you have some aerial views, some drone views of your travels in France, which I think is amazing. And I think that, you should do more of that and document it for other individuals with disabilities to see, because now you're part of our community, um, and I think that would be a huge contribution to be able to let other people see the exciting, spectacular life of traveling solo in a wheelchair, despite the challenges, yes, but it's also very thrilling.
Yeah, there's a few things in there that I'd love to speak to. I mean, the first is sort of this approach that I have taken in the last couple of years, and it was a pretty deliberate decision, kind of coming out of the hospital, and it was like, well, the world right now shrunk down to the size of initially my hospital room, and I want to really concertedly try and expand that back out. I used to live my life world-sized, and I want to get back to living it at that, level again. So I think I viewed it kind of as like going to the buffet table and just try stuff. Like I went out and mountain biked in Bend, Oregon with the Oregon Adaptive Sports Foundation. I, got out with high fives and surfed, and I've gone sit skiing and road biking. Yeah, athletically, in general, just physical things that are new and make me a little uncomfortable at the, initial thought of them. It was just like, I know I need to press into that stuff and get uncomfortable, because it's the only way I'm going to start to expand my world back out. And also figure out, like, in this new way of things, like, what do I love? I used to really love, like, I was a very committed, passionate distance runner, ran collegiately, got in a racing chair, did the New York City Marathon. And, is this something that I'll reclaim and make a regular part of my life? Side note, that's still an open question, whether the racing chair is going to be a day-to-day thing. But yeah, so putting aside, I guess, that one point, which I think is very important, and explains why I was doing so many things. But the second point that you got to, of like the value of documenting and sharing of that experience, I need to do more of it, more than just some drone videos. I do write a bit here and there. I don't have like a regular blog or anything I have to keep, but I do very much believe in the importance of that. And I think I've benefited from, because it makes the theoretical concrete, right? Like when you see someone actually doing the thing that you're like, I wonder if I could, And so I do a lot of like one-on-one mentoring at Crick Hospital, and a lot of sharing of story with people individually, because just for that reason, I think it helps make things concrete. And again, getting to that idea of like demystifying the unknown. It's like, once you know someone who's done certain things, even if you're not trying to do exactly that, you feel more confident going out and trying similarly new and a bit uncomfortable kinds of stuff.
Exactly. And I love how I saw that you have videos of yourself getting in a chair, like those aspects of ourselves we're not necessarily comfortable showing. Even me, I've been in a wheelchair for a long time. I've been unable to walk since I was a toddler, and yet I hesitate in documenting the less glamorous side. And
Right.
I appreciate that you're so uninhibited like that. And it frees, when I was watching, it was freeing me from having to create this perfect image.
Right. Yeah, it gets pretty awkward sometimes, right? And I think, this gets to another sort of like core principle, if you will, that I really firmly believe in, which is that the way we make ourselves relatable, the way we connect with one another, is not by showing off. It's, by being vulnerable, and like, we're messy. And so, yeah, me sort of surfacing some of the experimentation with like, I wonder if I can get in the wheelchair from the floor this way. And, it's one of my first times trying it, and it's not always, like you say, the most glamorous, but I think we're all, disability or not, we're all out here in this life experimenting. It's one big petri dish of a science experiment, figuring out how to live this life. None of us have done it before. So I think, yeah, being vulnerable in our efforts to figure it out. On the one hand, like you're kind of getting at, like it gives others the permission to try and not always be perfect about things. But yeah, it also makes it more fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on one more tangent, but then I'm gonna ask the next question. I
Okay.
really like the video of you trying to get on a chair backwards. I've never even thought of doing that.
Hmm.
Um, so that was awesome. Do you
Hmm.
feel that you have to prove yourself more in all facets of life now that you did
Mm.
before your injury?
It's a pointed and very good question. There's a tension here, and I've thought a lot about this, talked with some of my close friends and family about it, because I think, and let me be specific, the tension is between, on the one hand, this very positive, good thing, which I mentioned earlier, of like pressing boundaries, experimenting, getting uncomfortable and trying new things, and always, I mean, especially in these early days for me, like kind of pushing the limits of where my world is, because like I mentioned, kind of shrunk down quite a bit in the immediate aftermath after injury. So like trying to get out of a helicopter to the Grand Canyon, like whatever, like on the one hand, in the spirit of continuing to press boundaries and broaden life back out, super positive. But then the tension, right, is between that and um, showing off. I mean, like the the risk, right, of like doing these things, getting affirmation for them, and doing them for the affirmation, not for the positive benefits in my life. And I think I've tried to be conscious of that, and I think I've done a pretty good job of being, um, you know, what's the right word for this? I don't know, just like deliberate in my efforts and try to do things for the right reasons. But anyways, I recognize there's tension there, and try to sort of manage that.
Yeah, and I think this is a person. There's no right or wrong answer. I think the most important thing is to be honest for us wheelchair users or people with other kinds of disabilities is to
Hmm.
answer that honestly with ourselves. Like, are we doing this because we truly love it, or are we doing this because we're trying to prove something? And if during that process of proving something we're enjoying it as well, there's nothing wrong with that. I think I think for me personally, I know that I'm always, not always, but like there have been times where I do things to prove a point and not necessarily because I want to do it.
Hmm.
And so just to draw a line there.
It's
So
a,
what,
actually, it reminds me, sorry to cut you off. I actually like, so I just maybe oversharing some of my nerdiness here, but like I write and reflect a lot, and I have these like oversized post-its that I'll put up on my wall in my room to like kind of just visibly, physically surface in ideas that I want to be top of mind and be reminded of. And I have a post-it up on my wall that says something to the effect of like, live for purpose, not praise. And it's important to remind ourselves, because our natural tendency is so often like this sort of tribalistic seeking of affirmation that yeah, can get in the way sometimes.
and that's a process as well. I've learned that as I've grown older and some of my wheelchair users, as they've grown older and navigate in a wheelchair or blind or whatever other disability, they're able to do in a way that that shows that they own it rather than as having an audience or a spectator. So, what have you gained from getting injured and living life from this new perspective? And what have you lost or missed, both either physically or psychologically?
Well, that question could be a book. There's a lot packed in there. I think one of the biggest things that I've gained, um, which I speak about sometimes, is uh, it's allowed a depth in my relationships, and not even just my like long-standing inner circle relationships with friends and family, but like just across the boards, people that I interact with in the world, people that I meet out in transit, on a train, the Uber driver conversations I have, the folks I meet out at bars, like because my stuff, uh, like my wheelchair's announces itself before I would have a chance to put words to it. Like it's physical, it's visible, and it's part of like an intimate part of my story that like I kind of almost, whether I intend to or not, lead with a bit of vulnerability, and especially if it comes up in conversation, like a little soundbite of my story, and that very often sort of elicits this initial level of trust, and often the conversation goes to more substantive places. There's not a whole lot of talk about the weather, and I really personally like value that and love that, and so that depth of relationship and connection is something that has been hugely augmentative in my life. And yeah, I mean, you also ask in the same question, like, what are some of the big things that I've lost? I mean, physical freedom and freedom of movement. It's a huge part of my life before injury. As I mentioned, I was a runner collegiately and ran post-collegiately a bit. I mean, like, I was a very serious skier. I did a bunch of yoga. Like, movement, freedom of movement, just the physicality of my being was a big thing. And yeah, I miss the goat paths, running up in the hills. There's definitely real loss, and I think, we don't have time to go all the way deep on this, but like what it means to grieve well, to really acknowledge and not sort of turn away an ostrich head in the sand from loss, but also not let it consume and become this like vicious cyclical thing. Has taken time. It's taken some incredible friends and family that have come alongside me. My faith's also a big part of my life, and sort of a regular practice seeking and praying and listening to God has been a very sustaining and ultimately sort of reconstructive process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying about it. Sure, the losses are obvious and limiting in some ways. I think perhaps you'll be able to find a more creative way to still do what you love to do. I know I recently just reached out to an adaptive program in the DC area, because that's where I live, and a guy who used to love sailing, he founded a sailing team out here in the DMV area, and created this opportunity so other individuals with disabilities can also go sailing. So I think maybe it just requires more effort, creativity to come up with new ways to do it, but you will be able to do it. You just have to put it in the effort to find a way, rather than before there was a path and all you needed to do was pick up the tools.
Two things off of that. First of all, heck yeah, totally agree. And awesome about the adaptive sailing program. I can't wait to hear stories from that, Ming. The second thing, though, I would say is, and I think this is an important point and something that I have not been perfect about in my past, which is that the acknowledging loss and grieving piece and the creative solution finding and re-envisioning of the things that you love are two separate and crucial parts of this process. And I think my tendency sometimes, just generally in life, is to like jump right to solving and be like, yeah, but like what new ways can we, like, let's get super jazzed about. And that's wonderful. Like, there's really good stuff there, but it needs to be decoupled, and there is a right way to really spend the time and approach acknowledging loss and grieving. And it does ultimately need to lead into that solution finding side.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that point, sure, and I'm glad you emphasized that as well. Being someone who contracted polio when I was a toddler, so I don't relate as much to being a fully grown adult and well into it as well, and then suddenly having this huge life change. But I certainly relate to it on some levels. I don't want to pretend that I relate all the way. So thank you for sharing that. So The question is, how has other people's preconceived notions of individuals with disabilities impacted your life? How has it broadened the scope or limited your life in any way?
Interesting. Yeah. So as I've learned increasingly the varying ways that and like the varying flavors of preconceived understanding people bring to the table, it's on the one hand it's forced me or it's yeah sort of been a cause for me to really think more thoughtfully about others' perspective. Like I think it's it's what empathy is, trying to understand where others are coming from, and I think it's just become much more of a regular practice in my life in any encounter with someone new, like a new or old friend. Where are they coming from? What's their perception? I've realized, and I because I had 30 years of life able-bodied before I was sort of, you know, immersed in this world of disability, like I
And
really
the yeah,
nothing.
and these sorry to interrupt you. And
Right,
I was thinking, and these preconceived notions, were there long before you were relevant in this community.
right, right. And on the flip side, I was one of those individuals that had preconceived notions or just like a lack of understanding. Um, and yeah, it's a whole complex thing to dig into, but I think probably the biggest takeaway or guiding thought when I try and engage with folks in the world on this is that it's important to see what people intend, not exactly what they say. Like take people on what they mean, and not on the specifics of their language, because so often, um, an incredibly caring, thoughtful, well-intentioned individual will say something that's like prickly, it's like a little cringy, and not to say that there aren't teachable moments, and I think discerning that is far more art than science, but baseline, the most important thing to be like an empathetic, like positive person in this world is to, again, try and take people on what they're intending and not exactly on what they say. Yeah, and then if it's appropriate and it's way off base or something like that, taking a moment to try and from a place of love, like uh, inform someone of things they may not be otherwise aware of, is also very important.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know exactly where you're coming from, and actually now that as you were talking, I could relate so well. And it's one of those things that it happens all the time. And when you're like asked for an example, I was like, then you draw a blank because it's happened so frequently. But I know what you mean. There's a fine balance between between calling them out and between understanding that they didn't know that that was a derogatory term, perhaps.
right.
And
There's one example that I was sharing with my brother Tyler the other day that sort of gets at this idea that take the plank out of your own eye before the splinter out of another's. Like with a lot of this stuff, I try to focus on me first and see if I'm coming at the interaction or just coming from a place like a charitable place as opposed to like a sort of quick to offense judgy place. And I was kind of chuckling, telling my brother Tyler about this the other day, where in the same day, I'm in and out of my car a bunch. It requires me to pull the wheels off the chair and put them in the back seat and then pull the chair into my passenger seat. And so like in one occasion I was loading into the car and an individual was walking by, I don't remember specifics, but like, this person didn't offer to help. And in my mind I was like, I kind of like, if someone was walking by, if I was walking by and I saw someone loading a chair and taking time, like I might offer to help them. And then like an hour later, I'm doing the exact same thing in a different place, loading in, and someone offered to help me. And my initial response in my head was like, I've got this. What? You don't think I'm independent? And like, you laugh. It's like, if you're going to take offense in every possible scenario, like what kind of life are you going to be living here? And like I was maybe a little sleep deprived or, hangry at that point in my day. But I do think it's important to like, again, what's the intention here behind what people do, and make sure our expectations of others are coming from a place of empathy and understanding. It's important.
Exactly. Yeah, I've had the exact same experience as well. In those feelings, I actually can't. So as I was listening to you, I was like, "Whoa!" In this short amount of time, you learn to uh, drive. Do the adaptive hand controls and put a wheelchair in your car. That's pretty amazing. I still can't do that because my wheelchair is way heavy. It's like 40 pounds, which I think yours is as well, perhaps.
No, we can nerd out on gear. I'm always happy to do that. But I have a wheelchair that's like super lightweight.
Oh.
It's like all one piece titanium, nothing's adjustable. I got it custom built to basically minimize weight and size. So I used to have a heavier chair, and it was much more cumbersome to do. So
How heavy is it?
right now, the frame, once I pop the wheels off, it can't be more than like 12, 15 pounds.
Oh, wow. Really?
And even though I have no like core muscles or, because I'm paralyzed sort of like right below my upper stomach, right below my chest, it's sort of like an awkward bicep curl. But since the weight is fairly light, it's not a big encumbrance.
So that's perfect segue onto our last question under identity disability. How has the role of technology changed in your life since your injury?
I'm smiling because I have joked with many a friend about this, that I've totally nerded out, and home automation has become maybe a little bit unhealthy in how much I enjoy tricking out the apartment. I can't say her name, the Alexa word, because 8 rooms, or no, not 8 rooms, but like, there's 3 or 4 of those scattered about. And I have found, to try to be more serious about this, a huge benefit in just like reducing day-to-day friction through leveraging technology. I work in software. I love figuring things out and building. And I think, one thing with living with a disability is that just stuff takes more time and there's more friction. We were talking about getting the wheelchair in and out of the car. Like even just changing my thermostat used to require me to get onto the couch, out of my chair, hit the thermostat, and get back into my chair. And so, everything from, I've got the Nest now that I can control with voice throughout the house, and the lights and the locks and the sound system, and it's all automated. And although I don't think that's critical, like you don't need that, I have enjoyed more broadly just creating systems that reduce friction and win time back. And certainly the technology flavor has been a lot of fun.
That's great that you've been able to have fun with it and automate it, make it easier. Like you said, it's a great excuse, right? I don't think anybody can come up with a better excuse. So moving on to fitness, why is staying fit especially crucial for people with disabilities, specifically wheelchair users?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think disability is a broad term, but speaking again specifically about being in a wheelchair, where I'm not using my legs to move around the world, I'm relying on my upper body. We're not necessarily designed to propel ourselves throughout the world day to day using our upper body, and so like one huge reason for fitness is maintenance of the body. I think you got to use it or you lose it, and so I work out to stay strong and have good mobility in the body, part of my body that I can use, so that I don't get injured. And I think that's one really important reason. I mean, another massive reason is because I think we're also designed to move and use our bodies as a matter of just like health and well-being, like mentally. I get very bummed out if I'm sitting around on the couch all day. So getting out in the world, getting out into nature, breathing fresh air, and breaking a sweat, I think is just like 101, totally crucial. Certainly for my life, how I've always lived it and aspire to continue to live it. And yeah, community too. Like you working out with people, whether it's at a gym or going for a hand bike ride with a group, like that connecting through sport and through activity, through fitness is another huge value. I mean, there's a laundry list of reasons, but there's 3 of them.
Exactly. Never mind the importance for individuals with disabilities. They emphasize that everywhere for everybody, and the reasons are, like you said, numerous. So our last question, how can wheelchair users stay fit? So I alluded to all the different adaptive sports activities that you've been up to since your injury, and feel free to go into detail of all the different kinds of programs, different organizations that you've been involved with, and perhaps listeners listening could be, or Google that and be like, oh, I'm in the area, maybe I can reach out and be involved with that organization as well.
Yeah, there's quite a long list. So I've been very involved with the High Fives Foundation, which is Truckee based, but serves a community of adaptive athletes around the country. The Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation helped me do the New York City Marathon, and I've been very plugged in with them. They're an incredible resource. The CAF Foundation out of San Diego, Oregon Adaptive Sports out of Bend, Oregon, the Kelly Brush Foundation out of the Northeast. Craig Hospital, where I did my rehab, continues to just be like bread and butter, unbelievable community and resource for all things post-injury. Oh boy, now I'm feeling like, what if I forget a big one? I'm gonna regret it later. There's just been so many particular memories and like huge blessings in my life from all the different foundations I mentioned, but yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Justin. So that was our last question, and so thank you for sharing and coming on the podcast episode. I think our listeners will be able to learn a lot from that segment. So thank you.
Ming, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.